Now, from the show bands to the birth of rock music in Ireland, once you trace it all back, it all came from Elvis Presley. His influence on music in this country was and still is profound, and Ivor Casey has written a book about this, tracking that influence. It's called Elvis and Ireland, and Ivor joins us now. Good afternoon, Ivor.
Thanks for having me.
Yours is probably the only book about Elvis's relation to Ireland in existence.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So it's got a unique selling point already.
Yeah, hopefully so, anyway. Yes.
As far back as you can tell, when was the influence of Elvis first felt here?
Well, in the 1950s here in Ireland, Elvis was not played on Radio Éireann.
Because he was filth.
Well, that's the way it was seen at the time, yes. The church didn't seem to like him a lot. Well, all the religions really didn't like him. He was considered the agent of Satan, the devil's music. So in Ireland, they seem to have a stronger hold over the people with regard to Elvis. Like the fact that most people couldn't get him, they couldn't hear him, other than tuning into Radio Luxembourg.
Right, okay.
Which,
what did you do on the sly sort of thing?
Yeah.
And presumably, but I suppose that reaction was similar to evangelicals in the States.
Absolutely.
He was big on his hips and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But somehow outside of Ireland, there was there was more access. I guess there was greater communications available in other countries, like in Britain. He got #1 hits early on, and there was a fan club set up. But Ireland, you had to sneak under the covers and listen to Radio Luxembourg.
So you couldn't actually buy his records here?
Well, I think you could buy his records, all right, but there was a lot of poverty. There was condemnation. He didn't get there was no rock and roll revolution in Ireland at the time, the way there was in Britain. Cliff Richard came along and Tommy Steele, and then eventually the Beatles. Whereas here, we didn't seem to have anything happen until the 60s, when the beat groups and the show bands just kicked into force.
And so was it more a case that it wasn't necessarily the usual musical track of somebody in Ireland at the time might have been that they'd go to see a show band, the show band are covering Elvis, and then after that they discover Elvis, rather than discover Elvis and then see a show band covering him?
That's one of the ways, all right, yeah. Like, there was also his movies, though, at the time, too. For Elvis, because he didn't leave America, his movies were considered his way of getting into other countries, or for people to see him, to visually see what Elvis was all about. But then a lot of Elvis' movies were censored in Ireland as well, and one in particular was banned. King Creole was banned in Ireland originally in 1958.
On what basis?
There was the censor at the time, very highly conservative censor, who was Liam O'Hara was his name. He wanted 8 cuts to the movie. Now, some of them were very small. Rationale for the basis of Elvis's character being rebellious and all those kind of things were in the movie, and he wanted those cut, and the studio wouldn't cut them. So they banned the movie. Was not shown to an Irish audience at the time.
Wow, must check that out again. So did Elvis actually have any hits in Ireland?
He did eventually, because the charts were not set up here officially until 1962, an Irish chart system. And Elvis's the very first #1 hit in Ireland was a song called "She's Not You" by Elvis. So Elvis had the first Irish #1 hit, and he had the first Christmas #1 hit with "Return to Sender." So Elvis was extremely popular, though, in Ireland. He was the forbidden fruit.
Yes.
He was extremely popular, and even throughout the 60s, when he was kind of fading away into a movie career, he still remained very, very popular, and had a great influence on the likes of Rory Gallagher and Phil Lynott, and they saw him as huge. They were well inspired by Elvis.
The church's resistance to him, did that fade then, once the charts came in and it was obviously very popular?
Yes. Well, by 1959, Elvis was brought up in Dáil debates on whether he should be played on Radio Éireann or not for revenue purposes. They saw all the money that Radio Luxembourg were making because the people were tuning in to foreign radio. Yeah. So some Fine Gael TDs at the time were debating whether they should play Elvis or not. It was kind of this it's the kind of thing that was going on. They saw the money that it was making, and then eventually Radio Éireann started playing Elvis throughout the 60s, and music changed hugely, and the Beatles came along, and music went off on a different road.
Is it possible to track how many Irish artists have covered Elvis songs?
It's probably very difficult, but throughout my book, Elvis and Ireland, there is I mention almost every major Irish act to come, has covered at least one Elvis song, whether it's U2 or Aslan or the Cranberries or Mary Coughlin. They've all covered an Elvis song, and he seems to touch everybody. Somehow that one of his songs seems to become one part of their repertoire as well.
But presumably, depending on the band, say the show bands, the kind of Elvis songs they might have covered and the way they would have covered them probably would be quite different to the U2 would have.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Because I've heard a lot of the covers by the show bands, and I don't want to criticise show bands. A lot of people find them easy a target to criticise, but they were live jukeboxes in the 60s. Yeah. They were very, very important for a country primitive in communications, and but they were quite softer. Elvis was very raunchy. When you see his 50s performances, he was a very raunchy, sexual kind of performer.
Yeah, and the show bands wouldn't have been that.
And they wouldn't have been some. That's true. And but the beat groups, though, they kind of brought along more what Elvis represented. Even though the Beatles probably would have been their number one influence.
Did Elvis have any Irish connections? Was he aware of Ireland? Where it was?
Well, he's certainly aware of Ireland, because in an interview in Germany in 1959, when he was in the army in Germany, he was asked about classical music and opera, and one of the things he said was that he had keen interest in Irish tenors. And when you see Elvis's catalogue of songs, you see that he's recorded Danny Boy and I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen, which are famous for Irish singers like Joseph Locke and John McCormack. So he was certainly aware of Irish tenors, and they were one of his influences as he grew up listening to radio.
Okay. Well, that's the two kind of cliched Irish songs.
Well, I suppose they are quite, but
covering his demographics there.
That's true. But after the army, he went and he took an interest in opera. Like when he recorded "It's Now or Never," which is based on "O Sole Mio," again, I suppose a standard. It just showed that he did have an interest in the Irish singers, and the fact that he referred to Irish tenors certainly made clear.
It was a mention anyway. Did nowadays when you hear Elvis songs being remixed and that kind of thing, or as an Elvis fan, are you horrified by this?
That's a tough question. Like 10 years ago, a Little Less Conversation came out, and it was considered. Yeah. We went to number one, in the charts. It reintroduced Elvis to a new generation, and I'm in my 20s too. So, I do see that it does have an effect. I saw a lot of people they liked it, but tampering with Elvis's music is. I don't know what an artist would think of that. It's not really a good thing, I think.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the age. Really, did you like Elvis's movies as an Elvis fan? Which Elvis did you like? Did you like kind of comeback special Elvis, Fat in Las Vegas Elvis?
I was introduced to the kind of later period Elvis, the one you call Fat in Vegas. Yeah. I see that as a tragic Greek god, falling apart kind of Elvis, and I was fascinated by, the man who suffered from depression more than but I do respect the earlier Elvis.
Well, it's true, you got to have pain, really. The book is called Elvis and Ireland. Ivor Casey, thanks a million for talking to us today.